All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We'll be looking at the Analyst Hub today, concentrating on the Analyst Hub, where you'll be able to import data. Basically, we'll explain what the Analyst Hub is, the different file formats that you can use to import data through the user interface, which is what we'll be concentrating on today. How do we import data from Excel files? You might have sales plans, budgets, forecasts that you might want to incorporate into your analysis within Stratum. We'll talk about how we can get that data in and the different file formats and, that we can use to get that data into Stratum. Which is basically what a big portion of the Analyst Hub allows you to do, is to basically import data. It also has a capability to import master file data as well, and we'll talk a little bit about that, what that entails, and what you can do with that particular feature. All right. Another part of the hub is data copy and planning as well. So the write back capabilities of adjusting forecasts and budgets. So that capability exists as well as part of the Analyst Hub. So lots of different things to cover, and we'll also show some examples of that as well within the demo. Any questions can be addressed through the chat feature, or you can also wait until after the class, and you can send me an email as well. I'll share my email here at the end of the presentation. So here's the Data Hub in its entirety, and as you can see down in the lower left quadrant, we can see the Stratum Analyst Hub and all the different features that it provides. Whereas you can see the data copy feature, where you can copy data to create budgets and forecasts from your demand or actual sales categories. You can apply factors to those. You can increase them, decrease them as needed. You can dictate what levels they'll be copied at. And you can also apply filters, so you're not copying everything. So you can decide what sections of data you'd like to copy. You can create sandbox scenarios, all kinds of things you can do with the data copy. Multi-level planning allows you to take the data that you just copied and to play with it, make adjustments to it, do what-if scenarios, whether they're projected costs, projection pricing. You decide what you want to make available to your users so they can make adjustments to the data. And you can even build out a complete sales and ops forecasting process with this. So lots to think about here. If your data is locked up in spreadsheets or text files or database tables, well, we can import that as well. So with the latest version, you can import data not only from Excel, but from also text files, ASCII text files, SQL tables from on-premise databases. You can also import data from cloud sources as well. So whether that's a blob container or some files hanging out there on cloud source file directories, you'll be able to tap into those as well. So we'll cover all this, and then we will look at a demo of some of the examples of some of this as well. This does require a license, of course. So you'll need to look into your licensing to see if you're actually licensed for it. I can help you with that. And if you want to talk to me about that, we can talk about whether you're currently licensed for it or not, and then we can move forward from there. But we can also get a quote to you as well. If you're not caught up on the latest version of Stratum, you'll need to get on the latest version in order to take advantage of a lot of this that we'll discuss today. If you're on an IS series or an AS400, this is something that you'll need to talk about getting off the I series in order to take advantage of some of these features, because they're not available if your backend is on the I series AS400. All right, sounds like disclaimers. All right, so basically, what type of formats will it provide, or will it import data from? And as you can see, I've got an example of what a horizontal, or what we call a time series file looks like, where you might have a file where you've got the different dimensions available, and then you've got some sort of forecast or budget data out there that's horizontal in fashion. As you can see, I've got January, February, each in its own column, and that's what we call a time series. Transactional data, we can take as well. So if you have a file or any file that has a timestamp on it, as you can see here, we've got a month, a date, and a year. You can obviously import this type of data as well. This is what we call a transactional file. So whether it's horizontal or transactional, you'll be able to import this data into Stratum. And that's whether it's in Excel or a text file for that matter, or a database file for that matter. Some of this still applies, obviously. So, you just got to remember that you've got to have a date in there, right? In order for us to bucket the data and make it available so that we know what month to place that data into, right? The data import process is accessed through different menus depending on what version you're on. If you're on the latest version, you can see on the right-hand side the hamburger menu, which appears in the upper right-hand corner of your interface. So most of you are up on the latest versions, and we'll see that portion here on the upper right-hand corner. If you're on a more older version, you can see that it's in the admin utilities, and you can still access it using data import there as well. Either way, you'll be able to get to the data import screen where you can then see prior jobs and kick off new jobs as needed. Clicking on the new button, you'll be able to then dictate what file you want to use to import your data. And as you can see, I'm using an Excel file within this particular presentation, but you can also source text files, database files, etc. And we'll kind of talk about how you could do that. As a matter of fact, I'll show you an import from a text file. Version 7.6 or greater data import has been enhanced. Well, I shouldn't say in greater, where 7.6 is the latest. And as you can see, you can source data from these different file source options. You can see local. Is it a file that I have locally on the network or on my PC? Is it on the cloud on Azure? Is it an Azure blob container or some sort of file share out there on the cloud? Is it coming from a SQL Server database on premise? Or is it an Azure SQL database out there on the cloud? All of this is available, so you can import data from these different sources into your Stratum database. Once you make the decision about what kind of file you're going to use, in this case, you can see in the screen, we're using a text file, and then you'll have to go through some configuration options there to kind of tell the product, how to deal with the delimiter of that file, and what the text quote or data looks like in terms of any types of quotes to treat as text. Simple questions to answer based on how the file is formatted and what kind of data you have within it. Pretty simple. Here we can see other options where we can use cloud import options as well. And we can import transaction data from Azure sources into the Stratum Data Hub as well. Once we have a file that is more time series oriented, in this case, we're actually using a time series formatted file where the data is going across horizontally. And here, as you can see, we're using the configuration menu option to tell it that we're using that as a time series file. And you also have to tell it how many rows, how many header rows you have within that file, and where your date is, where your timestamps are, so that we know where to find that as well. Again, using these different types of options that are available. And as you can see, we're actually importing an Excel file that's coming from the cloud source, an Azure blob container. So whether it's on premise, an Excel file on the cloud, you have that option to decide where you're going to source that data from. Another option or a feature that we have available is this concept of a template, where you can build a template for your data import job so that it remembers that file format, so that the next time you import that file, you don't have to go through all the mapping, um, data mapping process, where you have to tell it, what the columns are and what they mean. So that's what we call an import template, and you can save that with the job so that the next time you import data using that same file format, it'll know immediately what the columns are, and you can then more efficiently go in and process the data without having to, again, map the data again, which would be redundant to do. So those are called import templates, and they're only, again, available for transaction-based source files. They're not, this is something you would not use for a horizontal time series file. And the reason for that is that the time series file gets remembered anyway, because you're telling it what's in the headers. Whereas with the transaction-based file, the headers are not as important. So that's why we have the template option, so that you can save that template along with that data import and for that transaction-based file, so that in case you need to do it again, it'll know immediately what those files are, what those fields are within those files. So again, transaction-based only, template, import templates. And then also there's a Stratum Cloud Import API. You can create and process imports with URL calls, compatible with Azure sources, local SQL Server databases, and you can optionally use these with import templates as well. So this is way more advanced than what I've seen our customers use using Stratum API calls to get the data into Stratum, but it's something that is available. Other ways to work with the import API, you can use it with another application, website, or a service. Here we have an Azure example where we're using it with the Data Factory to import from Azure Data Pipeline. You can run imports right away or schedule using the app events event criteria. This is what we feel kind of what the future looks like with Data Factory and data pipelines. There's a new data steward designation that you can apply to a user that gives them more control, who and how they can, it gives them more freedom in terms of what they can import and how that the different things that they can do with those import. You can restrict some categories and features to stewards only. So if you do have people out there that want to do this type of stuff, it would behoove you then to go ahead and designate them as a steward, a data steward, which pairs up with the category maintenance settings, and it's reserved only for security administrators. Okay, so only a data steward can only be applied to a security administrator. They can import from any import source, a data steward. So they have this is full blown. So this is, something that you would want some data scientists to have, so that the feature, all these full blown source features are available. If you're not a data steward, you can still import data. You just won't be able to do it from the cloud sources, as you can see here. Here's the import, once you get the file in and you're mapping the file, you have pull down menus to decide which fields and options are going to be dimensions versus your measures. And again, your configuration menu to tell it where the time frame, where that timestamp is within your file. Once you can do all the mapping, you can then verify and go ahead and kick off the process. It'll tell you whether it looks good or not, and then you can then kick off the process to go ahead and write the data back to the database. You'll get an email telling you when it's ready, so that you can then go in and start analyzing the data. You can then run your views, and as you can see, your data is available, and you can then start analyzing that within your Stratum views. The planning features can also be made available, so that you can make adjustments to the data. But if you're using the data import, that data specific is not planning enabled. But if you are using the data copy feature, you can then use the planning features to make adjustments to your data. And then there's another concept of the master data import process, which allows you to import data into an attribute. So for instance, if you have an attribute about a product or a customer that you want to make available in Stratum, you have the ability to do that as well. Security and view administrators can do this, just like with the regular data import features. And you can import data, add attributes to your data, and make it available as hierarchies, which is essentially what all this text means. Not a great slide. So here's an example what that file would look like. Here we can see by product. I've got all my distinct products here, their description that we won't load in that description, but we can have a marketing code that we want to tag to these products to further keep an eye on these marketing programs that we want to identify with these products that we're running. So this is just an example of what you can do. You can do other things like other descriptions about the product, other attributes that you may not have within the ERP system, and you can make available from your files, and then build out, still import attributes into products or customers or whatever else that you would think would provide value. Here we can see we're importing data and doing a lot of promotions where we're importing the data and tying that to a UPC number from our Excel file, which then becomes available and now becomes a hierarchy that we can summarize the Stratum data on as well. So from Excel to Stratum, we can see that these attributes are now available for us to drill in on. So it's a really cool concept. It works really well. We do have quite several customers taking advantage of this concept. That's my email. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. You can either call me or email me, and we can set up some time to discuss this, talk about your licensing. And if you want to see a demo in more detail, we can go into that as well. So let's take a look at some of this in action. We have the ability to go in and use our data import feature here within the demo. Here we can see in the upper right-hand corner, if I go to Analyst Tools, there's my data import menu option. If I want to take a look at and manage my templates that I've created from my data import jobs, I can go in there. And then there's my master data import. So if I want to create an attribute, that would be the area to go into for that. Before we do any of this, I'll take a look at some of the data, the files that we'll look at. If we go into the folder, we can see that here's the file that I'll be using to import. And as you can see, the data by region, customer, brand, product. And then we've got projected sales for January all the way through December. So that's basically what my file looks like. And if I want to see, so basically I have two header rows, and then the time periods are on the second header row. So I'll need to tell it that through the configuration when I'm ready to import that file. So let's take a look at how we would import that. So if we go into our Analyst Tools, Data Import, here we can see all the jobs that we've kicked off before. And if we want to kick off a new one, we click on the new button and we select that file we just looked at. So by clicking on open there, it then opens the data, gives me a preview of the file, as you can see, and it's already mapped. So I don't have to map this again. It already remembers. I've done this before. So it remembers this time series file, and it does the mapping for me automatically. So really, at the end of the day, all I have to do is kick it off so that it will then process the job and feed the data back to Stratum and store it within Stratum. Pretty easy to do. Now, if I wanted to change the mapping, I could and tell it whether it's a dimension, a measure, is it a date field? Do I want it to ignore this particular field? What dimension is it? If I do deem it as a dimension, which dimension is it? And then I can go in and it'll only show you the dimensions that are available for that particular category that you're configured for. So here, if I click on my configuration button, as you can see, it's already configured to my budget accounting category, and it's treating it as a transactions-based file. So if I turn it into a time series file and I say that my time is on that second header file and it looks like that, I can click OK to that, and then it'll then treat this as a time series file. Okay, so don't have, and I can just kick that off, and I don't have to, and I just wait for my email to arrive so I can go in and take a look at that data. If we were to use a different style or transaction-based file here, and that's not within Excel, it's in a text file. So in this case, we're tapping into a text file, a tab delimited text file, and then we also have our date going down in a vertical fashion. So this is not a time series file. This is what we would call a transaction-based file. So what would that look like if we want to import that? Well, we would basically pursue the same option. We would go into Analyst Tools, do the data import, and then once we go in and we decide what file we want to use, here we would select the text file and click on Open, and it'll right away ask us, okay, it noticed that it's a local file, it's text in nature. Where do I want to put it? Do I want to, what category do I want the file or the data to live in within Stratum? What type of delimiter does it use? And we saw that it was a tab delimited text file. And then any quotes that would quantify as a field quote, then it's either a double or a single quote. So we click OK to that. We can see that we've got some mapping to do here, and tell it where, to put this data and where it's going to live, right? And then tell it, that these measures are supposed to go here, under our promo sales amount, right? If we had a place for units, then we could put that somewhere, or we can just ignore it. So as you can see, you can ignore some of the fields that you have within that file if you don't want choose to import that data. Then if I were to import this, then only my promo sales would be available at the region level, right? And then it would then bucket the data accordingly, right? Once you have the data, so you kick that off, and then you can start using your uh, your views. Once you have the view available and built, and you can start looking at this data. This is the data from the Excel file, and as you can see, customer sold to product. The data is all there, uh, for me to take advantage of for January through December. So this is data that I actually imported using the Excel file import. Now, if we were to look at the attribute, if we wanted to import some master data, we would then go into our master data import, where we can then select our attribute data, um, and that's going to look like this. We click on open, and we saw this in the presentation where we're saying, okay, well, for all of our products, we want to load in this product marketing group code so that we can group these items into their specific marketing code that we're running promos on, and we just want to use this as an identifier for which promo gets assigned to which product. And these are just codes I made up, obviously, but you might have some legit codes out there, and so it may not be available in a table, or you might have in that is living in a file somewhere that is important, and you guys are using it, you're reporting against it, and this is a way to get that data into Stratum so that you can then marry it up to all the data you have within Stratum and make your analysis more rich in nature. So we kick that off, and what does that look like? Well, if we use that same view, we can actually go in and see the product marking code. And actually, as you can see, I'm now using that attribute as a dimension where I'm summarizing data on it. It's quite magical. And then I can then drill in on it, and I can see that we're running this promo for the East, and then this promo is running for the East and West. And then it gives me the group of customers that we're running the promo on. And it's all from just that simple master file import data file that I imported that allows me then to see this data and then to then use it as a dimension within my view, right? On top of that, I can then, once I start garnishing data like transactional data, like sales data, then I can bring that into my analysis and I can then show my sales versus my budget and see areas where I'm hitting or missing my budget. And this is all data that's coming from, you know, files, Excel files, transaction-based files, text files, you name it. I was able to build this particular analytical view here. Most of the data, the marketing group code, my budget data, that's data that's coming from my data analyst. That's using the Analyst Hub to import the data into Stratum. Okay. So, that's the meat of what data import's all about. You have this capability to tap into files within your enterprise, incorporate that data into Stratum, marry it up to your data that you already have within Stratum, your sales data, and make that data available for your users and give some of your analysts the power to really start incorporating some of this outside data into Stratum that's meaningful for your users.